it's always satisfying when a genius like Charles Krauthammer agrees with you. That just somewhere deep down inside that warms my heart. I've been saying this for years. This was the goal when they created it. I said there's no way these healthcare companies can survive this. They can't stay in business with these restrictions forced on them. And really, that's what we're seeing. Let me get to Hadley Heath Manning joining us right now, Health Policy Director at the Independent Women's Forum. Hadley, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So Donald Trump's been hammering on this since yesterday when this word first came out on 25% increases in premiums. He's arguing that the increases are even higher than that for some people. That I guess in terms of where we are in the election cycle, the timing on this couldn't have been better for Trump anyway.
Well, that's right. The 25% increase is a national average, so there are some markets where people are going to be paying double, so more than a 100% increase in premiums. And obviously, bad news for Obamacare, for President Obama, for Democrats who voted for the law, and for Hillary Clinton, who's defended the law. But, I wouldn't call this an October surprise. If you're somebody who's been following the Obamacare story, you know that health insurance companies have been exiting these exchanges because of financial losses. And the ones that are sticking around are basically trying to correct course because over the past few years, Obamacare hasn't attracted the balanced pool of applicants that Democrats were hoping for. Instead, it's been people who are sicker, older, and more costly in terms of medical claims.
Yeah, your website at IWF.org had linked to a story from The Hill on these rate hikes. They have one example from Arizona, a 27-year-old who was paying $196 without subsidies will instead pay $422 for the same coverage. That's a 116% rate hike. I mean, that's
right. And you mentioned a key word here in this whole debate, and that is the word subsidies. So about 90% of the people who have bought Obamacare plans in the exchanges are receiving some kind of tax credit or subsidy. And we can expect that that's what Democrats are going to be focusing on in this story. They're going to say, well, it really doesn't matter what the unsubsidized premium is because most people are just paying a subsidized premium. And as taxpayers, we ought to perk up when we hear that because essentially the contribution that each individual makes to his or her premium in the exchange is taxed at a portion of their income. And so if their income doesn't change, they're not going to be paying a lot more next year. Instead, the difference is what taxpayers are paying on their behalf, that subsidy or that tax credit. This means all those fiscal estimates about Obamacare's budget are going to be woefully off. It's going to be much more costly than predicted. But again, none of this is surprising to those of us who knew from the beginning that this was not going to be the Affordable Care Act. It's an unaffordable piece of legislation. So
assuming that it's clearly not an October surprise for most people. The choice we face in this election still determines where this monstrosity goes.
Absolutely.
Whether it gets wrapped up in some capacity under a Trump administration or it gets either expanded or pushed into government subsidies or a single payer option under a Clinton administration. So maybe it'll drive home the point for some people about how important the stakes are on November 8th.
That's right. And you know what's interesting? A lot of the Democrats who are running for Senate offices are not the same Democrats who voted for Obamacare in the Senate because those people have already been voted out of office. But you're absolutely right. The future of this law is hanging in the balance. Democrats now are saying they want to add a public option. It's very easy for them to demonize private health insurance companies, especially when we're seeing rate hikes like these. But it's important to keep in mind that the reason for the high premiums is not because of capitalism. It's not because there's a quote-unquote free market when it comes to these insurance plans. Instead, it's because of the very misguided regulations that take a risk completely out of the health insurance equation. That was the wrong way to go in the first place, and we don't want to go further down that road.
No, and I've already had a call today with somebody arguing, well, what's wrong with that? I'm on Medicare, and my wife and I pay a little bit of a premium, but it seems to be working pretty well. And my point was simple. We don't need another thick government bureaucracy piled on top of us where you're having to take more money out of my paycheck to provide health care for someone. And that's where they're pushing this.
And Medicare is a single payer for people over 65, and then we have the Medicaid program for low-income people as a safety net. But the problem with a public option is that it's open to everyone, and it's intended to, quote-unquote, compete with private health insurance companies. And ultimately what we're going to see is a heavily subsidized public plan competing with private health insurance companies that face taxation, that face regulation, and that's not fair competition. So we're going to continue to see a driving out of those private health insurance companies from the marketplace until that public option becomes the only option. Mark my words, those of us who have been critical of Obamacare, we're getting tired of saying, I told you so. And that's certainly the case today with this news about the premium.
Well, I guess where I don't see this ending well, no matter which way it goes. We knew from the front end, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hadley, when this plan was put into place, it was backloaded with taxes. So the main part of the expense didn't start kicking in till the last couple of years. I just wonder, even if Trump was to get elected, which if you believe the polls is less likely today than it was 2 weeks ago. I'm not even quite sure how he unwinds this thing.
Right. Well, Republicans in the House and in the Senate have proposed their own plans for what to do if we had the opportunity to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that was more market friendly. Because I think most American people recognize that Obamacare is a disaster, but the system we had before wasn't perfect either. It certainly was not a free market. And so anything that we can do to remove some market distortions,
right.
And there's a lot of opportunity for reform and improvement here. Unfortunately, the problem with President, future potential President Clinton, is that she doesn't see it that way, and she's now saying she supports that public option, making it all the more important to prevent that from happening.
That's the truth. Hadley Heath Manning, listen, I appreciate your time from the Independent Women's Forum. I direct people to your website at iwf.org to read more details on these stories and more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day. I mean, she brings up a good point. It's got to go somewhere, folks. November 8th is going to make that decision, just like the Supreme Court. It's either going to get fixed in some capacity or it's going to go really, really bad. Bill, thanks for holding on.